On a red-eye flight from Atlanta to L.A., Lydia Carter cradled her infant in first class, only to be struck without warning by a cold, authoritarian flight attendant. The sudden assault shattered the cabin's calm, igniting a fierce, high-altitude showdown where whispered prejudices and shocked gasps filled the air. Lydia's quiet defiance in the face of such brutal injustice forces us all to question power and dignity in unexpected places. Where are people watching? Comment below, like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more gripping stories. On a red-eye flight from Atlanta to Los Angeles with celestial air, Lydia Carter cradled her infant son close as she settled into her first-class seat. Clad in a smart blazer and exuding quiet determination, symbols of a life built through hard work, Lydia had earned her ticket and reserved her spot well in advance. The cabin, bathed in soft lighting designed for a restful journey, promised tranquility. However, the calm was shattered within moments. Without warning, Fiona Doyle, a flight attendant known for her rigid adherence to protocol, strode briskly down the aisle. Her uniform was immaculate, and her eyes, narrowed in suspicion, fixed on Lydia. In a jarring moment that seemed to defy all decorum, Fiona's hand struck Lydia across the face. The sudden blow reverberated through the silent first-class cabin, drawing gasps and shocked glances from passengers absorbed in their personal routines. Lydia's heart pounded, and a sting of pain spread across her cheek. Yet even as confusion and disbelief rippled through the cabin, Lydia instinctively held her son tighter. Though the shock of the assault left her momentarily dazed, a deep inner strength began to emerge. She knew in her heart that she had every right to be in that seat, her reservation was valid, and her journey was a testament to her perseverance. Around her, well-dressed travelers in business attire and designer outfits turned their heads in alarm. Smartphones were raised as a few passengers began recording the unfolding incident. Whispers filled the air as people tried to process the unexpected act of aggression. Fiona, her face set in a mask of stern determination, appeared unyielding, at least for a few breathless seconds. In that brief, chaotic moment, Lydia's dignity was both challenged and affirmed. Though the pain of the slap was acute, it did not break her resolve. Instead, it ignited within her a quiet defiance, a promise that she would not allow this injustice to define her or tarnish her spirit. Every detail, the harsh sound of the blow, the startled expressions of those around her, and the low hum of the engines, etched itself into the memory of the flight, marking the beginning of a struggle that would soon extend far beyond the confines of the airplane. Lydia's eyes, though momentarily stinging, soon narrowed with determination. In the silence that followed, she resolved to stand her ground and to fight for the respect that was rightfully hers. Unbeknownst to her, this act of aggression was only the opening chapter of a long battle, a battle that would expose prejudice, challenge authority, and ultimately forge a path toward justice. In the minutes following the shocking assault, Lydia Carter sat quietly in her first-class seat, the pain in her cheek mingling with a burning determination not to let the incident break her spirit. Around her, the atmosphere in the celestial air cabin was charged with a mix of disbelief, empathy, and a growing urge to document every moment of what had just occurred. Smartphones appeared from every corner as passengers began recording, ensuring that the record of this injustice would not fade into silence. Despite the physical sting and the emotional shock of being struck, Lydia maintained an admirable composure. Every time she felt the weight of the incident press upon her, she clutched her infant son even closer, silently promising him, and herself, that she would stand strong. The murmurs that filled the cabin were not of derision but of concern. Some passengers whispered, "How can someone treat her like that?" while others exchanged supportive glances, affirming that Lydia's presence in first class was not only deserved but earned through her hard work. As the flight continued, Lydia's inner resolve deepened. She recalled the days of preparation and sacrifice that had led her to this journey, the long hours spent studying civil rights law, and the determination that had carried her through countless challenges. In that moment of adversity, she found strength in her own story, a story of perseverance, dignity, and a refusal to be defined by the cruelty of others. Though the memory of the slap stung, it also became a symbol of the injustice that she was determined to overcome. Throughout the cabin, the ripple effects of the confrontation began to shift perceptions. Passengers who had once been absorbed in their own worlds now watched with rapt attention as the event unfolded. A group in the adjacent row whispered among themselves, "She's handling this so well, it's inspiring." Their hushed admiration resonated in Lydia's heart, fueling her determination. For every cold glance or whispered doubt, there was an equal measure of support, silent affirmations that reinforced her belief in her own worth. Meanwhile, the flight crew moved with an air of tense professionalism. Some attendants exchanged concerned looks as they attempted to restore calm, yet even they could not entirely mask the shock that had rippled through their ranks. A couple of them muttered quietly about whether strict adherence to protocol had become a cover for personal bias. Their uncertainty added another layer to the complex atmosphere in the cabin. As the hours passed, Lydia's quiet strength began to shift the narrative. She refused to let the incident define her, instead, she focused on her inner resolve. With every supportive nod from a fellow passenger, every encouraging whisper that she overheard, Lydia's determination grew. She knew that her dignity was not just for her own sake but for all those who might one day face similar injustices. The act of recording the incident was not merely a reaction to aggression, it was a collective stand against prejudice, a silent rally for truth and respect. During the flight, Lydia also took time to reflect on the inherent strength it takes to endure public humiliation without breaking. In her quiet moments, she closed her eyes and focused on her breathing, drawing upon a deep reservoir of resilience. Though the physical pain was real, the emotional wounds were beginning to heal under the warm glow of communal support. By the time the flight neared its destination, a transformation had taken place in the cabin's energy. The initial shock of the assault had given way to a determined solidarity among the passengers. Lydia Carter, with her infant son cradled in her arms, had not only survived the ordeal but had also become a symbol of perseverance. Her dignified silence in the face of adversity spoke louder than any outburst ever could. And in that moment, as the aircraft began its descent toward Los Angeles, Lydia knew that her journey had only just begun, and that she would carry the light of her unbroken spirit into the next chapter of her life. After the shocking events that unfolded high above the clouds, the turmoil on Celestial Air's red-eye flight from Atlanta to Los Angeles continued to escalate. In the wake of the CEO's unexpected announcement that Lydia Carter was his wife, the dynamics in the first-class cabin had shifted dramatically. Yet, the battle was far from over. As Lydia tried to reclaim a semblance of dignity after enduring a brutal slap and the subsequent humiliation, Fiona Doyle, her relentless accuser, seemed determined to salvage her reputation at any cost. Moments after Derek Ellison's revelation, Fiona's face contorted into a mask of indignation. Realizing that her authority was slipping, Fiona hastily retreated into a quiet corner near the service cart. There, with trembling fingers, she composed a terse message on her phone addressed to her union representative, now renamed Trevor. "I am being unfairly targeted. I was merely enforcing our protocol," she typed. "I must not be suspended. Advise immediate action to contest any termination." The words, punctuated by a series of frustrated exclamation marks, conveyed both her desperation and determination to maintain control. Across the cabin, the incident was far from a secret. Several passengers, having recorded the earlier altercation and Fiona's subsequent behavior, were already sharing the footage on social media. Within minutes, hashtags praising Lydia's dignity and condemning discriminatory practices began trending. The live feeds and video clips that surfaced on Celestial Air's official channels and local news platforms painted a vivid picture. A hardworking woman, Lydia Carter, was being singled out and assaulted, while an overzealous flight attendant attempted to rewrite the narrative by invoking false claims of rule violations. In the quiet murmur of the cabin, voices began to form an impassioned chorus. A well-dressed businessman in the row behind Lydia leaned over and murmured to his companion, "I've seen the video, this is blatant abuse of power. No one should be treated this way." Others nodded in agreement, their expressions a mix of shock and quiet solidarity. Lydia, despite the lingering sting on her cheek, remained seated with a steely gaze. She knew that while Fiona's message might reach the upper echelons of the Union, the overwhelming evidence would soon expose the truth. Within a few short minutes, Trevor responded to Fiona's urgent text. "Fiona, I understand your concerns. I'll call you shortly. In the meantime, document every detail and hold by your account," the message read. For Fiona, the response was a double-edged sword. While she now had Union support on paper, the viral video evidence and eyewitness accounts were rapidly eroding her credibility. The cabin air was thick with anticipation, passengers eyed their screens and discussed the unfolding drama in hushed tones. The flight, once expected to be a routine journey, had transformed into an impromptu battleground of public opinion. Lydia's quiet resilience was slowly inspiring others to question the narrative Fiona was desperately trying to construct. Every shared post and every retweeted clip chipped away at Fiona's version of events. The digital record of what had transpired was building a case that no amount of protocol could override. As the plane cruised steadily through the night sky, Lydia's inner strength began to shine even brighter. She sat silently, cradling her infant son, aware that each moment of recorded truth was a step toward justice. The supportive glances from strangers and the rapid spread of evidence on social media underscored one undeniable fact: truth, when captured and shared, holds an unassailable power. In that charged atmosphere, the actions of Fiona Doyle, once justified as strict enforcement, were now being scrutinized under the harsh light of public accountability. Lydia's presence in first class was validated not only by her confirmed reservation but by the unwavering determination of a community that believed in fairness. The viral outcry was more than a momentary scandal, it was a clarion call for reform, urging Celestial Air's management to revisit and revise its policies to ensure that no passenger would ever be treated with such disdain again. By the time the next in-flight announcement came over the intercom, the cabin was abuzz with a mix of indignation and hope. The powerful digital evidence had begun to rally support for Lydia, setting the stage for what would become a long, arduous fight for justice, a fight that would extend well beyond the confines of that flight. As the flight pressed on into the night, the repercussions of Fiona Doyle's desperate text and the ensuing viral spread of evidence began to reveal a more sinister plan. Lydia Carter, despite her physical pain and emotional turmoil, sensed that Fiona was not content to let the matter rest. In hushed corridors and behind drawn curtains, Lydia observed that Fiona was texting incessantly, her eyes darting about as if plotting her next move. It quickly became apparent that Fiona was now actively courting the media, a move intended to twist the narrative and paint Lydia as the aggressor rather than the victim. In a quiet moment near the rear of the cabin, Lydia, with her baby securely nestled in her arms, discreetly reached for her phone. Determined not to allow Fiona to manipulate her story, she began recording a personal account of the unfolding events. "This is my truth," Lydia whispered to herself, her voice trembling but resolute. Each recorded detail, from the ambient sounds of the engines to snippets of whispered conversations among fellow passengers, was an act of defiance against the encroaching smear campaign. Around Lydia, a ripple of anxious discussion spread among the passengers. A young professional in the row behind her confided in a neighbor, "I heard Fiona is already talking to a reporter. They're trying to spin this story to make it look like Lydia was the instigator." Another passenger, scrolling through social media on his tablet, added, "There are already posts claiming that Lydia's behavior was disruptive. But look at her, she's the picture of dignity." The collective sentiment was clear: while Fiona was mounting a sophisticated media assault, the passengers were determined to stand by Lydia. In the flight attendants' area near the galley, whispers of concern became more pronounced. Some crew members exchanged glances that spoke of shared uncertainty. "This isn't just about enforcing the rules anymore," one attendant murmured. "It's about controlling the narrative, and I'm not sure Fiona is doing the right thing." Their words, though subdued, underscored the growing awareness among the staff that something was deeply amiss. Lydia continued to document everything. With each passing minute, she captured the subtle shifts in the cabin's mood, the anxious eyes, the fervent whispers, and the determined nods from those who believed in her innocence. In one particularly poignant clip, Lydia recorded a soft-spoken passenger saying, "When injustice is public, it's our duty to speak out." That moment, though fleeting, filled Lydia with a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Fiona Doyle's attempts to reframe the incident began to falter. Her rapid texting and furtive glances suggested that she was desperate to salvage her credibility. Rumors started circulating among the passengers that Fiona was coordinating with external media outlets, attempting to release a statement that would recast Lydia's calm demeanor as a sign of arrogance or defiance. "I heard Fiona is planning to twist this into a story about an unruly passenger," one traveler whispered, his tone laced with disbelief. "But that won't work, Lydia's record speaks for itself," another replied firmly. In the midst of this digital chaos, Lydia's resolve deepened. Though physically exhausted from the earlier assault, her spirit burned with the determination to ensure that her side of the story was heard. She continued to record her thoughts, her voice clear as she said, "I will not let false narratives bury the truth. I stand for every person who is ever unfairly judged." Her message, shared discreetly with fellow passengers, slowly spread across the cabin. As the flight crept toward its destination, the energy in the cabin was charged with anticipation. Each time a new social media post surfaced or a passenger whispered a word of support, Lydia's inner strength grew. The digital archive of evidence being built by those around her promised to hold Fiona accountable, even if the flight's journey was not yet over. In that confined space thousands of feet in the air, the battle for truth had taken on a new dimension. It was no longer merely a confrontation between an aggressive flight attendant and a dignified passenger, it was a struggle for the integrity of every individual who had ever been marginalized by injustice. Lydia's quiet determination, bolstered by the collective support of her fellow travelers and the power of digital truth, had turned the tide against Fiona's calculated smear campaign. By the time the aircraft began its final descent, the cabin's mood was unmistakably transformed. Although Fiona's efforts to manipulate the narrative were still in motion, the overwhelming support and documented evidence provided Lydia with the tools to fight back. In that moment, as the lights of Los Angeles beckoned on the horizon, Lydia Carter vowed that her story, recorded with painstaking detail, would be a beacon of hope and a testament to the enduring power of truth. When the aircraft touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, the dramatic saga that had unfolded on board Celestial Air was far from over. As Lydia Carter disembarked, her infant son safely in her arms, she was immediately met by a hostile crowd assembled outside the terminal. What had begun as an in-flight dispute had erupted into a full-scale public confrontation. Supporters of Fiona Doyle, whose smear campaign had painted Lydia in a negative light, had gathered, their voices raised in anger and disdain. "She doesn't belong in first class," one protester shouted, while others hurled insults that echoed off the polished walls of the terminal. The hostile chorus was designed to shame Lydia, to discredit her story, and to lend credence to Fiona's distorted narrative. Despite the barrage of verbal abuse, Lydia maintained a calm and dignified composure. Every insult felt like a personal attack, yet she refused to let them break her spirit. Clutching her son tightly, Lydia pushed forward, her steps measured and determined. "I have every right to be here," she silently affirmed, drawing strength from the knowledge that her truth had been documented and supported by countless witnesses. Amid the chaos, a group of sympathetic passengers emerged from the crowd, forming a protective barrier around Lydia. Among them was Evan Price, the lawyer who had recorded the events on board and whose footage had gone viral. His presence lent undeniable credibility to Lydia's account. "Ignore the hate," he urged, his voice steady despite the clamor. "We know the truth, and we stand with Lydia." His words, combined with the shared glances of support from others, began to turn the tide. As the confrontation escalated, some individuals in the crowd resorted to physical aggression. A particularly belligerent man grabbed Lydia's arm, attempting to force her away from the protective group. The situation grew increasingly volatile as onlookers shouted for calm, and security personnel rushed in to restore order. In the ensuing confusion, Lydia was forcefully separated from the supportive cluster by security guards who, caught in a maelstrom of conflicting reports, detained her under the guise of maintaining order. Shocked gasps and the flashing of mobile phone cameras captured every moment as Lydia was led away. Even as she protested her innocence, security officials, swayed by the false narrative crafted by Fiona Doyle and her supporters, claimed she was responsible for instigating the disturbance. The scene was chaotic, with conflicting voices rising. Some decrying the injustice of Lydia's arrest, others echoing the misguided claims of her detractors. In the midst of this turmoil, Lydia's husband arrived at the terminal. His face, etched with concern and anger, conveyed the deep injustice of the situation. He tried to reach out, calling her name, but the guards held her firmly, their actions cold and mechanical. "This is not how it should be," he cried, his voice cracking with emotion as he pleaded with the officers. Yet, overwhelmed by the chaos, security continued to follow protocol, further isolating Lydia from her support network. Outside, the public reaction was immediate and fervent. Social media exploded with hashtags like #StandWithLydia and #JusticeForLydia. Protesters gathered outside the terminal, their chants echoing down the street as they demanded that Celestial Air be held accountable for the wrongful detention and the systemic bias that had fueled the incident. Eyewitnesses, many of whom had recorded the incident, provided statements that reinforced Lydia's account, turning her personal ordeal into a powerful symbol of resistance against injustice. Despite the pain and humiliation of being forcibly removed, Lydia's spirit remained unbroken. Even in the cold, harsh environment of the holding area, she managed to record a brief message on her phone: "I will not be silenced. I stand for every person who has ever been marginalized. We deserve justice." That live-streamed plea, shared widely by supporters, resonated with thousands and amplified the call for accountability. As the day wore on, the media picked up Lydia's story. News cameras flashed, interviews were conducted, and public figures weighed in on the unfolding saga. The wrongful arrest of a respected civil rights attorney became a rallying point, a vivid reminder that the fight against discrimination must continue until every voice is heard and every injustice is rectified. For Lydia, the hostile crowd at the terminal was a painful but transformative experience. It reinforced her resolve to fight not only for herself but for all those who had been silenced by prejudice. In that charged moment, as she was led away and then later released amid overwhelming public pressure, Lydia Carter emerged as a symbol of strength and dignity, one whose resilience would inspire others to stand up for truth in the face of overwhelming adversity. In the days following her arrest at Los Angeles International Airport, Lydia Carter's battle for justice took on a life of its own. What began as a single, harrowing incident aboard a Celestial Air flight had now erupted into a nationwide outcry. With her personal ordeal exposed on social media and broadcast by news outlets, Lydia's voice became a rallying cry against discrimination and abuse of power. Her case transcended the confines of one wrongful arrest; it became emblematic of the broader struggle for civil rights in an industry long criticized for its opaque policies and unchecked authority. Shortly after the incident, Lydia's legal team, led by her steadfast ally Derek Ellison, mobilized to challenge the actions taken against her. They gathered all the recorded evidence from the flight and the terminal, meticulously documenting every detail of her mistreatment and wrongful detention. In a series of press conferences, Derek outlined the systemic failures that allowed such an injustice to occur. "No one should ever be stripped of their dignity on a flight," he declared, "and our investigation will ensure that those responsible are held fully accountable." Public reaction was swift and resolute. Social media exploded with hashtags calling for reform, and civil rights organizations began coordinating protests outside Celestial Air's headquarters. Supporters of Lydia, many of whom had been passengers on that fateful flight, banded together in virtual communities. They shared testimonies, posted videos, and organized local meetings to demand sweeping changes in airline policies. The movement grew rapidly, fueled by the undeniable truth captured in Evan Price's recordings and the powerful live-streamed messages from Lydia herself. In the days that followed, media coverage intensified. Prominent news anchors and investigative journalists scrutinized the airline's practices, uncovering long-standing issues of bias and discriminatory enforcement. Internal emails leaked from Celestial Air revealed disturbing directives aimed at marginalizing certain passengers, and public pressure forced the airline's board to convene emergency meetings. Derek Ellison, whose earlier announcement had provided Lydia with the public validation she deserved, now took the initiative to promise significant reforms. "We are committed to transparency and accountability," he said in a televised statement. "This incident will serve as a catalyst for change, and we will overhaul our procedures to ensure that every passenger is treated with respect and fairness." Meanwhile, Lydia continued her own fight from within the confines of temporary detention. Though the conditions were harsh, her resolve remained unbroken. In a quiet corner of a holding cell, Lydia recorded a message that would later be shared widely on social media: "I will not be defined by this moment. I stand for truth, justice, and for every individual who has ever been silenced by prejudice. Together, we can build a future where dignity is a right, not a privilege." That message resonated deeply with thousands, igniting a surge of support that spanned communities and even reached high-ranking officials in government. The momentum of the movement soon began to pressure regulators and lawmakers. Public hearings were convened, and experts in civil rights and corporate governance were called upon to testify about the need for stricter oversight in the airline industry. The scandal not only tarnished Celestial Air's reputation but also sparked a broader debate about how institutions safeguard the rights of the most vulnerable among us. As the investigation unfolded, Lydia's case became a turning point. It was no longer just about one wrongful arrest, it was about exposing a pattern of systemic injustice and demanding accountability at every level. In that spirit, Lydia, supported by a growing coalition of activists and legal advocates, began planning her next steps. Her journey, marked by personal pain and public courage, had transformed into a powerful movement for change that promised to reshape the future of air travel. By the time Celestial Air issued a formal apology and announced sweeping reforms, Lydia Carter had emerged as a beacon of resilience. Her steadfast determination in the face of overwhelming adversity not only reclaimed her dignity but also ignited a fire for justice that would burn bright for years to come. If you found Lydia's story as inspiring as we do, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to support our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing powerful narratives that champion justice, equality, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. Just as the flight's turbulence settled and a tentative calm began to return to Celestial Air's first-class cabin, a startling announcement pierced the quiet. At precisely 2:59 into the flight, Derek Ellison, the CEO of Celestial Air, took over the intercom with a measured yet commanding voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce that the passenger in seat 4A, Ms. Carter, is my wife." The revelation sent a shockwave through the cabin, instantly transforming the unfolding drama into something far more personal and politically charged. For Lydia Carter, the CEO's declaration was both a relief and a profound affirmation. Despite the searing pain from Fiona Doyle's earlier assault and the swirling whispers among the passengers, Derek's words validated not only her right to occupy the first-class seat but also her dignity. The air in the cabin shifted perceptibly as every eye turned toward Lydia. Passengers who had previously exchanged uncertain glances now looked upon her with newfound respect and empathy. In that electrifying moment, Fiona Doyle's previously unassailable authority began to crumble. The revelation that Lydia was the wife of the company's leader struck Fiona like a physical blow. Her confident posture faltered, and for a fleeting second, uncertainty shone in her eyes. The stark contrast between Derek's calm, resolute tone and Fiona's visibly shaken demeanor left an indelible impression on everyone present. The impact of the CEO's announcement was immediate. A ripple of murmurs and exclamations filled the cabin as passengers processed the unexpected news. "So that's why she's so composed," one passenger murmured, while another remarked, "Now it's clear she belongs here." Social media channels buzzed with activity as several passengers quickly shared snippets of the announcement, further amplifying Lydia's position. Despite the emotional toll of the earlier confrontation, Lydia maintained her composure. Her eyes, though reflecting the pain of the physical assault, now shone with a quiet, determined strength. She was not only vindicated in her right to be in first class but had also been elevated to a symbol of resistance against unfair treatment. Her calm and measured response, in the face of both aggression and revelation, became a beacon for all who believed in justice and dignity. Fiona, on the other hand, struggled to regain her footing. The public declaration from Derek had rendered her previous actions all the more indefensible. As the CEO's words echoed in the cabin, Fiona's earlier smug expression was replaced by a look of dismay and retreat. Her authority, once enforced with rigid insistence, was now undermined by the undeniable fact that Lydia Carter was, indeed, a first-class passenger by every right, and by the highest order of the company's leadership. The tension in the cabin, which had been building steadily, now reached a crescendo of silent approval for Lydia. Passengers began to lean forward, their eyes fixed on the intercom and on Lydia herself, as if drawing strength from her quiet fortitude. Even those who had not spoken a word earlier now murmured supportive phrases, their voices blending into a collective affirmation: "She belongs here. She deserves respect." In the wake of the announcement, the dynamics of the cabin began to shift subtly. Passengers who had previously been on the fence now took clear positions. Groups formed, and discussions about fairness, dignity, and the abuse of power in the airline industry filled the air. Lydia's case was no longer just a personal dispute, it had become a matter of public conscience, a testament to the struggle against systemic bias. Throughout the remainder of the flight, Lydia's resolve only strengthened. She sat quietly, drawing on the strength of the revelation and the solidarity that had begun to form around her. Every supportive glance and every shared post on social media further emboldened her spirit. The ordeal that had begun with an unprovoked slap was now evolving into a powerful statement of resilience, a declaration that no one would allow injustice to define them. Meanwhile, Fiona Doyle's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Her attempts to maintain control over the narrative were failing, and as the flight continued, her sarcastic remarks became less frequent, replaced by awkward silences and furtive glances. It was clear to everyone that the revelation had not only restored Lydia's honor but had also exposed the flaws in Fiona's aggressive enforcement of protocol. As the aircraft continued its journey toward Los Angeles, the interplay of voices and emotions in the cabin painted a vivid picture of a community awakened to the importance of fairness and dignity. Lydia Carter, once a quiet passenger on a routine flight, had now emerged as a symbol of justice. Her calm, unwavering determination in the face of adversity had resonated deeply with every person present, setting the stage for the next chapters in this unfolding saga. After the dramatic revelation over the intercom, the situation in Celestial Air's first class escalated rapidly as the plane touched down in Los Angeles. The tension that had gripped the cabin during the flight was now replaced by a maelstrom of conflicting emotions and public outrage at the terminal. With the CEO's announcement still echoing in their ears, passengers began to process the gravity of what had occurred. Lydia Carter, despite the pain from Fiona Doyle's earlier assault, maintained her composure and dignity. However, the struggle was far from over. As passengers disembarked, a heated scene unfolded in the airport concourse. A hostile crowd had gathered, some supporting Fiona Doyle's narrative and others rallying behind Lydia. Shouts of "She doesn't belong here," and "Get out of first class," filled the air, creating an atmosphere of chaos and tension. Amid the clamor, Lydia's husband rushed to her side, his face etched with concern. Together, they tried to navigate through the angry throng while maintaining a semblance of calm. Yet the raw emotion in the crowd was palpable, a stark reminder that injustice had a way of igniting public fury. Outside, local news cameras were already rolling. Reporters peppered Lydia with questions as she was escorted toward a waiting area by security personnel. The air was thick with anticipation, and every witness in the crowd seemed determined to capture the unfolding drama. In a brief, defiant statement, Lydia proclaimed, "I have every right to be here, and I will not let hate silence me." Her words, though quiet, carried a weight that resonated with everyone who heard them. Meanwhile, Derek Ellison, the CEO of Celestial Air, arrived at the scene with an air of resolute authority. His expression was one of controlled anger as he confronted Fiona Doyle, who was now visibly shaken. "Your behavior on that flight was unacceptable," Derek said firmly, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. In front of a gathering of reporters and disapproving passengers, he demanded a full explanation for Fiona's actions and insisted that the airline conduct an immediate, thorough investigation. Fiona, once so confident in her ability to control the situation, now faltered under Derek's scrutiny. She attempted to defend her actions, claiming she was just enforcing protocol, but her words sounded hollow. The evidence, viral recordings, eyewitness testimonies, and the weight of public sentiment, made it clear that her actions had been driven by bias rather than duty. As Derek's words resonated throughout the terminal, several senior managers from Celestial Air were seen conferring with him, their faces reflecting deep concern over the unfolding scandal. Within the terminal, the story took on a life of its own. Social media was ablaze with hashtags demanding justice and accountability, and local civil rights groups joined the chorus, calling for reform within the airline. Press conferences were scheduled, and as news of the incident spread, public pressure mounted for transparency and change. The incident was no longer a private matter between a flight attendant and a passenger, it had become a symbol of the systemic issues plaguing not only Celestial Air but the industry as a whole. Inside the press conference room, a senior airline executive faced a barrage of tough questions. How could a company that prides itself on excellence allow such discriminatory practices to occur? A reporter demanded. The executive's responses were measured but did little to quell the rising tide of public anger. It was evident that the airline was now forced to confront its own failures. In that charged environment, Derek Ellison vowed to implement sweeping changes, including mandatory diversity training for all staff and the establishment of an independent review board to oversee passenger complaints. As the day wore on, Lydia's ordeal continued to unfold. Her arrest during the chaotic departure from the plane had sent shockwaves through the community. Security officials, swayed by conflicting reports, had detained her under the pretext of maintaining order. Though she had been held for what authorities described as disorderly conduct, it quickly became apparent that her detention was nothing more than a tool to discredit her. In a quiet, heartfelt video recorded live from a holding cell, Lydia appealed to the public, "I will not be silenced. I stand for every person who has been marginalized by injustice." That message, shared widely on social media, became a rallying cry for those demanding change. Outside, protests began to form. Supporters of Lydia gathered, holding banners and chanting slogans calling for justice and an end to discriminatory practices in air travel. Community leaders and civil rights activists took to the streets, vowing to pressure the airline into reform and accountability. Every shared image and news clip added to the mounting evidence that the system needed to change. For Derek Ellison, the incident marked a turning point. The exposure of Fiona Doyle's misconduct and the wrongful detention of his wife had shaken the very foundations of Celestial Air. With public scrutiny at an all-time high, he pledged that no one in his company would be allowed to abuse their power or tarnish the rights of a passenger. "We must rebuild trust from the ground up," he declared at a subsequent press conference. "Our commitment to justice and equality will drive every change we implement." As the day drew to a close, Lydia Carter emerged as a symbol of resilience and unwavering dignity. With her husband by her side and her infant son in her arms, she stepped forward into a future defined not by the cruelty she had endured, but by the collective determination to create a more just and equitable world. In that charged moment, the battle for fairness had not only been fought, it had begun a new chapter in the fight against discrimination. If you found this story inspiring, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to support our channel. Your engagement helps us continue sharing powerful narratives that champion justice, equality, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. After the chaos in the terminal, the battle for truth took a daring new turn. While Lydia Carter was forcibly detained by security amid a storm of hostile voices and conflicting accounts, a determined plan was already unfolding to expose the conspiracy against her. Once inside a temporary holding area, Lydia managed to summon the strength to record a live stream using her smartphone. Her trembling voice, resolute despite the hardship, declared, "I will not be silenced. I stand for every person who has been marginalized by injustice." That live stream became the spark that ignited a digital revolution. Viewers from all over began tuning in, captivated by Lydia's raw honesty and unwavering dignity. As her message circulated across social media, footage of the incident, the aggressive behavior of flight attendant Fiona Doyle, the inexplicable detention, and the hurried whispers of corrupt officials, emerged as undeniable evidence of a conspiracy. Lydia's live stream showcased every detail, from the shocked expressions of fellow passengers to the hurried attempts by security to cover up the injustice. The mounting online pressure forced Celestial Air's upper management to take notice. Derek Ellison, the CEO, had already publicly declared Lydia's rightful status earlier on the flight, but now, as the digital evidence grew, his commitment to transparency was put to the test. Public sentiment swelled with outrage over the apparent misuse of authority. Social media users compared the incident to larger societal issues, debating the responsibilities of corporations in protecting human dignity. Within the crowded holding area, Lydia's live stream continued. In between moments of silence, she answered questions from concerned viewers, describing how Fiona Doyle had tried to twist the narrative and how even her own arrest seemed orchestrated to smear her reputation. "Every second I live this injustice," Lydia said softly, "I am reminded that our rights must never be taken for granted." Her words resonated with thousands watching live, who flooded her chat with messages of support, urging her to remain strong and promising to help spread the truth. Back at Celestial Air, internal communications began to surface. Leaked emails revealed that Fiona Doyle had been under pressure from her superiors to control the narrative at all costs, and that her brother, Trevor, had been involved in attempts to discredit Lydia through fabricated reports. These revelations added fuel to the online fire. Investigative reporters dug deeper, uncovering a pattern of bias that stretched beyond a single incident. For many, Lydia's live stream was more than a call to action. It was a declaration that injustice, no matter how deeply embedded, could be challenged by collective courage and digital solidarity. As the hours passed, the story continued to evolve in real time. Supporters organized online petitions and coordinated with civil rights groups to demand a full investigation into Celestial Air's practices. By the time the plane finally touched down, Lydia's live stream had amassed thousands of views and ignited a nationwide debate about discrimination in air travel. Her voice, recorded in that confined space, had transformed into a powerful testimony that promised accountability for those who had tried to silence her. In that moment, every viewer, every shared post, and every hashtag contributed to a movement that would change the narrative and compel a system built on prejudice to reckon with the truth. Part 10, approximate 800 words. After the dust settled from the chaotic events that began on the flight, Lydia Carter's journey took an inspiring new direction. In a landmark moment in court, Lydia stood before a packed courtroom to announce her decision to run for governor of Kansas, a move that would turn her personal battle into a crusade against corruption and systemic racism. The courtroom was filled with a palpable mix of anticipation and solidarity. Supporters, media representatives, and civil rights advocates gathered to witness Lydia's powerful declaration. With calm determination in her eyes, Lydia recounted the harrowing events, the unprovoked assault by Fiona Doyle, the wrongful detention, and the subsequent smear campaign orchestrated by those who sought to undermine her. Every detail of her ordeal had been meticulously documented through live streams and eyewitness testimonies, and now that evidence resonated throughout the courtroom. "I have experienced injustice firsthand," Lydia began, her voice clear and unwavering. "I was treated not as a person with rights, but as a target of prejudice, an act that I will not let define my future or that of our great state. Her words were both a personal catharsis and a call to arms, inspiring everyone present. As she spoke, the faces in the courtroom reflected deep empathy, and a quiet murmur of approval swelled in response to her message of resilience and determination. Derek Ellison, the CEO of Celestial Air and Lydia's husband, stood by her side. His presence lent both emotional and institutional weight to her declaration. Today, Lydia's courage has shone a light on practices that can no longer be tolerated, he stated during his own brief remarks. Our society must confront corruption and systemic racism head-on, and I am proud to stand with her in this fight. In the weeks following her court appearance, Lydia's announcement rippled far beyond the courtroom walls. Political analysts, civil rights leaders, and everyday citizens hailed her decision as a bold step toward transformative change. Her campaign was built on the principle that no person, no matter how high profile, should be above accountability, and that the voices of the marginalized must be amplified to bring about real reform. The legal battle had laid the foundation for a broader movement. Advocates organized rallies and public forums, drawing parallels between Lydia's struggle and the systemic challenges faced by many. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags such as #LydiaForGovernor and #JusticeInKansas, reflecting a growing grassroots movement that saw her candidacy as a beacon of hope for a more equitable future. As Lydia campaigned, she detailed her experiences not as isolated incidents but as symptoms of a deeper malaise affecting institutions across the nation. We must reform the systems that allow discrimination to thrive, she declared in interviews and at public events. My journey, from the unjust treatment aboard that flight to standing in this courtroom, is proof that we have the power to change the world. I will fight for every individual who has ever been marginalized by corruption or prejudice. Her candidacy quickly gained momentum, drawing support from a diverse coalition of voters. Community leaders, labor unions, and advocacy groups rallied behind her, impressed by her unwavering dedication to truth and justice. Lydia's message resonated particularly with those who had long felt disenfranchised by a system that often silenced dissent. In town hall meetings and televised debates, she spoke passionately about the need for transparency, accountability, and reform, not only within the airline industry but across all facets of public life. As Lydia's campaign gained national attention, Derek Ellison worked behind the scenes to ensure that Celestial Air's own policies would be overhauled in the wake of the scandal. He pledged that the company would implement comprehensive diversity training, establish an independent oversight committee, and take concrete steps to eliminate discriminatory practices from its operations. His proactive measures bolstered Lydia's message, reinforcing the idea that real change begins at every level, from corporate boardrooms to state government. By the time Lydia's first major campaign rally was held in Kansas, the combined force of legal vindication, public support, and sweeping institutional reforms had set the stage for a powerful movement. In her closing remarks at the rally, Lydia declared, "Today, I stand before you not just as a candidate, but as a survivor of injustice. Together, we will build a future where every person is respected, where corruption is rooted out, and where our society is defined by justice and equality." Her words were met with resounding applause and cheers that echoed long into the evening, marking the start of a new chapter in the fight against systemic injustice. If you found Lydia's journey and message inspiring, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to support our channel. Your engagement empowers us to continue sharing powerful stories that champion justice, equality, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.